Hello, Peacocks. This is Mr. Hood, and I'm here to kick off our Read Across America week. Probably my favorite week out of the entire year because we get to spend the whole week celebrating the importance of reading. So today I'm going to read a couple books with you that are my favorite, and actually they weren't my favorite until somebody suggested them to me. But I spent the weekend looking at them, and I'm excited to share them with you. And of course, we're reading to kids that are in kindergarten all the way to fifth grade, so they may not be just on your level, but there's something we can learn from both of them, and I hope you will enjoy it. So, the first book is called The Curious Garden by Peter Brown. And I don't know about you all, but we can't wait for spring to be here, and hopefully, we'll get outside. And many of you, your parents or grandparents, may have a garden, or you may yourself may have started a small garden. So anyway, this is a good book. There once was a city without gardens or trees or greenery of any kind. Most people spent their time indoors. As you can imagine, it was a very dreary place. I'm a very outside person. I don't like to be inside. I think it's very dreary to spend um, all the time inside. Today, which is Sunday when I'm recording this, it's rained all day and it's kind of dreary. However, there was one boy who loved being outside, even on drizzly days while everyone else was stayed inside. You could always find Liam happily splashing through his neighborhood. It was on one such morning that Liam made several surprising discoveries. He was wandering around the old railway, as he did from time to time when he stumbled upon a dark stairwell leading up to the tracks. The railway had stopped working ages ago, and since Liam had always wanted to explore the tracks, there was only one thing for the curious boy to do. Liam ran up the stairs, pushed open the door, and stepped out onto the railway. The first thing he saw was a lonely patch of color. Wildflowers and plants were the last things he had expected to find up there. But when he took a look closer, it became clear that the plants were dying. They needed a gardener. Little patch. Liam may not have been a gardener, but he knew that he could help. So he returned to the railway the very next day and got to work. The flowers nearly drowned, and he had a few pruning problems, but the plants patiently waited while Liam found better ways of gardening. As the weeks rolled by, Liam began to feel like a real gardener, and the plants began to feel like a real garden. It's already looking so much better just with him working on it for a few weeks. Most gardens stay in one place, but this was no ordinary garden. With miles of open railway ahead of it, the garden was growing restless. It wanted to explore. The tough little weeds and mosses were the first to move. They popped up farther and farther down the tracks and were closely followed by more delicate plants. Over the next few months, Liam and the curious garden explored every corner of the railway. There's a picture. You can see there's the railway here, and this garden has just spread. After spending his spring and summer and autumn with the garden, Liam's time on the railway was finally interrupted by winter. Heavy blankets of snow fell on the city that season, and for the first time since he became a gardener, Liam could not visit the plants. Rather than waste his winter worrying about the garden, Liam spent it preparing for spring. After three, look up here, he's reading, probably reading on how to be a better gardener. After 3 cold months, the snow finally began to melt, and Liam rolled his new gardening gear over to the railway. Winter had taken a toll on the garden, but thanks to Liam's planning, his handy new tools, and a little help from the sun, the plants soon awoke from their winter's sleep. The garden had always wanted to explore the rest of the city. And that spring it was finally ready to make its move. Once again, the tough little weeds and mosses set out first. They popped up farther and farther from the railway and were closely followed by the more delicate plants. The garden was especially curious about old forgotten things. A few plants popped up where they didn't belong. For instance, a stop sign. You need to be able to see the stop sign and the fire hydrant. Others mysteriously popped up all at once. But the most surprising things that popped up were the new gardeners. All these people coming to help. People mowing, people pruning, people watering, all over. People out enjoying it. Many years later, the entire city had blossomed. But of all the new gardens, Liam's favorite was where it all began. And you can see what the garden looks like now. So if you go to the front of the book and you kind of look how dreary it was at the front of the book, um, and then you take a look at how it is at the end, it went through a very big transformation. And this book is all about, this book's a lot about a lot of different things. Some of you in class have been talking about theme or the purpose of the story. And a lot of this has to do with pushing through, giving hard work. Hard work pays off, but also I like to think about it as kindness. He started off with a little bit of kindness to help these few plants, and it grew. And not only did it grow, but it also spread to the other gardeners and the other people. And I think that's especially true of kindness. If a little bit can end up going a long way. All right, so that's one of my new favorite books. Another favorite book, it's kind of a silly book, but still entertaining to read, is called A Camping Spree with Mr. Magee. Early one morning at 7:03, Mr. Magee and his little dog Dee packed up the camper and hitched up the load, hopped in the Rambler, and then hit the road. They drove to the mountains far from the sea for 2 nights of camping, or possibly three. One of my favorite things to do is camp. Now, I'm not really a tent camper. I'm more of a RV camper, but I still like to be outside. There, there's nothing like camping, said Mr. McGee. I know you will love it. Just you wait and see. The views are fantastic. There's hardly a sound. Aside from the wildlife, there's no one around. And the air is so sweet, you'll sleep like a log, said Mr. McGee to his small spotted dog. So they are going camping, going with his little friend here, his dog. A few hours later, they took a sharp right and found a great spot to lay camp for the night. It was high on a hill with a beautiful view of Mount Adams, Mount Lincoln, and Jefferson, too. Perhaps the most wonderful feature of all was the brook that ran over a steep waterfall. He gathered pine cones and branches and logs. McGee made a campfire and cooked some hot dogs. And as the sun set behind far distant knolls, they sat roasting marshmallows over the coals. As the embers went out, they felt tired and dozy as they climbed in their bunk beds all comfy and cozy. But while they were falling asleep without care, along came a stumbling, bumbling bear. A kindly old bear whose sight wasn't so clear, he couldn't see far and he couldn't see near. But he could smell marshmallows sticky and sweet. The smell made him hungry. He wanted a treat. He sniffed out at the place where the marshmallows lay, but the car and the camper were in the bear's way. Yet that didn't stop the sneaky old snitch. He simply tried squeezing right under the hitch. And as he was shimmying into the gap, he pushed up the hitch, which let go with a snap. So here's the bear trying to get underneath the hitch. Now the camper and car were untied. Now that the camper and car were untied, they started to roll down the rocky hillside. The car bounced away on the old logging road, while the camper was heading to where the stream flowed. It flew down the hill in a wild, bumpy ride, with Dee and McGee sleeping soundly inside. You can see them sleeping right there. They were snoring and snoozing, enjoying a dream, when splash went the camper right into the stream. The splash shook the camper. They bumped out of bed. Now, what in the world was that? Magee said. And when he looked out and saw where they were, his hair stood on end, and so did Dee's fur. They were caught in the rapids, but that wasn't all. They were headed smack dab for the big waterfall. Dee and Magee both started to quiver as faster and faster they headed down river. But just when they thought they'd fall over the edge, their camper got stuck on a rock at the ledge. So there they were, stranded, Magee and his pup, on the top of a waterfall 50 feet up. Meanwhile, that nearsighted bear from before was searching for one little marshmallow more, when lo and behold, as if out of a dream, he spied something sweet floating over the stream. But what the bear thought was a marshmallow treat was really the hitch and not something to eat. So he thinks the end of the hitch is a marshmallow. The bear was determined to capture his prize, so he jumped in the water right up to his thighs. He splashed to the stream to the edge of the fall and snatched up the trailer, hitch, camper, and all. Dee felt a tug. Magee heard a knock as the bear pulled the camper right off of the rock. He dragged them both all the way back to the bank when he realized the hitch was not too sweet but quite rank. He spit out the hitch and left in a dismay, while Magee and Dee's camper again rolled away. It flew down the path with a jolt and a jar and stopped in some bushes right next to the car. Dee popped her head up. Magee looked out too. Had they really stopped rolling? Could it be true? As things were quiet and peaceful and still, they hooked up the hitch and drove off down the hill. And on the way home, Magee said to Dee, that trip wasn't quite like I thought it would be. So when they got home, with the sky turning red, they decided to camp in the backyard instead. So here they are camping in the backyard. So many of you have probably camped in the backyard if you can't go camping or you can't convince your family to go camping. I think camping is a great way to build memories with your family. And I also think that reading with your family helps to create good memories. So I hope we have a terrific Read Across America week here at Robert Elementary, and we'll see you soon. Happy reading. Bye.